but they still had to have their skirts checked, or shorts, they wanted to wear the short shorter than they should. And so they would check, do the measuring and see. Not with them, they made them take their, go put their PE uniforms on.
Let her tell you about the skirts.
Yeah.
You would think the civil engineering surgery.
I know, that's really embarrassing, isn't it? Yeah.
You know, that, you told me that I had surgery.
Well, this lid.
Reunion, and the only two that have been canceled, there was one in Memphis because of the tornado. But Kathy still went. Where's Kathy? Kathy still went, and there were two sisters there from California.
Ready? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, just God, we just thank you for this gathering of the Gladney family and all the relatives. Father, we just thank you for the traveling mercies that you gave to each one of us as we travel here. Just pray that you just bless our time together. Just meet everyone here. It's all well and safe. Just pray that the nurses fit our bodies to your service. We ask in the name of Christ.
Okay, we have drinks, we have sandwiches, we have veggie trays, we have fruit trays, and I would like us to honor our elderly, just come and be served first. So all of our, I didn't say senior, but you know.
How'd you know? Very good.
Johnny Bradley, he's the mayor of Kilgore. He's been the mayor for 15 years, he just got reelected. And that is something really kind of cool. Also, because he's the past president, very hooked into Kilgore history. So I'm going to let him tell you the rest of his title behind that. And he's going to educate you about the history of Kilgore, all the fun stuff. And we have a lot of fun relatives that we are related to from Kilgore. So here you go. Oh, and you guys, I forgot to give y'all goodie bags because I wasn't at the station when you checked in. So I'm just going to bring your goodie bags around while Ronnie talks.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to give you a brief history of how Kilgore got here. In the 1850s, people were moving west, and a lot of them settled in the Kilgore area. The first place they settled was about 3 miles east of here, at a little town that was first called Rabbit Creek, and then it was changed to Danville, or New Danville, started then named Danville community, because the majority had come here from Danville, Kentucky. And the community was there from 1850, and in 1871, the railroad was coming through East Texas. And they didn't come through Danville, they came through one of the landowners in the Danville community owned the land where Kilgore is now, and they came through his land and bought land on both sides like they do and started the community. It was Buck Constantine Kilgore. And he stood up at the Presbyterian Church in 1872 and said, I vote we moved the church to Kilgore, and the session voted and they moved the church to Kilgore and left the cemetery still there from the Presbyterian Church at Danville. But the community started in 1852, and by 1870s they had a blacksmith shop, a dry goods store, a small hotel, a boarding house, and a little community of several hundred people. So they moved to Kilgore in 1872, and then all of Kilgore was in Russell County. The next year, several of the counties here got together, Gregg County and Upshur County, and they donated some land together, and they created Gregg County. So Kilgore was in Russell County for 1 year, and then became Gregg County. And as we grew, now part of Russell County is still in Kilgore. So the town started in 1872. It was mainly farming and timber. The railroad came through, and the town grew to be about 1,000 people by 1920. Then a drought hit in 1920, and the cotton prices crashed. And by 1930, the population had gotten one half of what it was, from 1,000 down to 500 people. Half the town had moved away because of the economy. Well, there were some, the oil companies had come to East Texas and drilled 6 or 7 test wells in and around the oil field, and just by chance missed the oil field, the fingers of the oil field every time they drilled a well. So major oil companies wrote off Kilgore. There was no oil here. There were some several people that had visions and dreams, and some scoundrels too, that came to town and talked people into investing in drilling for oil. And the story is that they got a lady down south of here in Russ County, Miss Daisy Bradford. They went to her property, and they drilled the Daisy Bradford #1. And they got together with money, an old junky rig, and they got together with money, and it was a dry hole. They skidded it with a tractor or mule team one over to another pasture, and they drilled a well. It was a dry hole. They skidded it to the third pasture, and a sill broke under it. It was going to be 50 cents to buy a new skid for the derrick. And they owed everyone in the county so much money, no one would even front them 50 cents. So they had to drill where the derrick broke. And supposedly the well started to come in, they realized they were using oil, and they tried to shut it down and not make that well make oil. And you know why? They had sold stock in it 300%. Three times the people thought they had invested in it than they really did. And one of the partners had 4 wives that he hadn't divorced yet either. So that well ended up coming in, and that was the first East Texas oil well. And then there was one across the railroad tracks that came in the next, that was in October. Then in December, they drilled one of the Kilgore city limits. There were 3 derricks across the railroad track on the Krim family land. And they owned the general store in town. And like I said, there had been a depression for the 10 years before here, way before depression hit the nation. We had been depressed and everyone was broke. Of course, they owed the general store money. And the family that the well came in, they came to church to tell her her well came in and she was rich. She said, don't bother me till church is over. And when she got out of church, the first thing she did was to wipe out everyone's bill that owed her money at the general store. And a lot of prosperity came to Kilgore, and it attracted a lot of ne'er-do-wells. Like I said, it was during the Depression. A lot of single men came here. There was money, so a lot of crooks came to steal the money. They brought in a Texas Ranger to get the city back in order. He was called Lone Wolf Gonzalez. And he came to town, and someone said, they just sent one ranger. He said, one riot, one ranger, that works. He came into town in disguise with a scruffy beard and dirty clothes, and he went around meeting everyone, and he spent 3 days here meeting all the crooks. And he said he could tell if a man was a crook or an honest, hard-working man when he went up and shook hands with him. He said if he's got soft, smooth hands, he's a crook because he doesn't work for a living. And they cleaned up the town. They ran out of jail room. They put a logging chain down the First Baptist Church under the pews, and they would handcuff or put an ankle cuff on the criminals in the Baptist church. They kept used it for jail for a while. So they cleaned up the town, and Kilgore was producing a lot of oil. They drilled 1,100 wells in the city limits of Kilgore. At one time, if they opened up all the wells in Kilgore, they could produce more oil than the nation could use in a day. The price of oil, we supplied so much oil in the market that drove the price of oil down to a nickel a barrel. A barrel is 42 gallons. So it went down to, for a short time, it was 3 cents a barrel. But people were still getting rich because one well might come in and blow out, and it would make 50,000 barrels a day. 50,000 barrels of 42 gallons. So all this oil was floating, and they came along and they wanted people to shut in the wells and not produce as much because it was flooding and ruining the market. Well, nobody was going to stand for that. I'm getting my oil out of my ground, I don't get as much. They sent in the National Guard, and they had a camp here, National Guard, and they forced the people into pro-ration and said how much you could get out of the ground. In fact, the rules about how close together oil and gas wells are drilled all over the world came from the craziness in Kilgore. The world's richest acre down here that has all the derricks on that 1/2 block, they tore down all those buildings to build the houses, the lots were 25 feet wide, the derrick was 24 feet, and they put these derricks. They tore down the bank and drove through the bank floor. So the more, and some people had 3 wells on their skinny lot. The faster you got wells, the more you got out of the ground because your neighbor's getting some. If you get it faster, you get more. So the rules all over the world about how close together you drill the wells came from Kilgore oil and gas wells. And the price of oil made our economy go up and down. We had millionaires, and we have 2 wonderful pipe organs in Kilgore that were donated from oil income from families. The one, the Presbyterian Church, has over 3,000 pipes, and at one time was one of the top 10 pipe organs in the nation. It was the first one to have, in the United States, to have trumpet pipes, and it is quite phenomenal if you ever get a chance to listen to it. The Methodist Church has one of the top pipe organs in the nation that has only 1 keyboard. So a lot of money went to the churches, and they built big buildings, and they tithed well. And we got to World War II, and I'll stop before World War II. There was a lot of money in Kilgore. One man operated, at one point we had 6 small movie theaters in Kilgore. They showed the first movie in the teens in a blacksmith shop. But anyway, the guy owned the Crim. He built this big Crim theater, which is the tall one next to it. It was opened in 1939, which is the year of the highest film or movie attendance in the history of the United States. The average person went to the movie 2.5 times a week. It was the first air-conditioned theater in the region, and it was in 1939. That was the year that Gone with the Wind, King Kong, and Wizard of Oz came out. And the Wizard of Oz was one of the first color movies. The Texan across the street started in the 30s, and it burned down, and they remodeled it, and then it burned down. They built it again during the World War II, and it only showed Western movies. If you go across, we've just redone it, but there are horseshoes in the pavement out front. It had big murals of very politically incorrect now, but there were robbers attacking a wagon train, and there are Indians attacking covered wagons. Life-size murals, but it only showed Western. And the two little boys that told me the story, they're both deceased now, they'd be over 100. But they were going into the Texan, and one of them said, "That movie must be really good, it's been on a long time." And the other little boy said, "What movie are you talking about?" He said, "That movie, Refrigerated Air." It was early in the industry, they didn't call it air conditioning, it was refrigerated air. I remember going to see, I think, Bye Bye Birdie at the Crim Theater. I was very disappointed it was a musical. But Kilgore had a really big boom during World War II. The head of energy for the British government said that the Allies floated a victory on a sea of oil, East Texas oil. One of the larger endeavors during World War II was a giant pipeline starting in Longview, Texas, and going to New Jersey. And the oil was piped to New Jersey to service our Atlantic fleet, to fill up the Atlantic fleet, and the fuel went to Europe with it. So Kilgore was a boom during the war. And after the war, Kilgore College had a GI Bill, and there were a whole lot of jobs here. And Kilgore College had the highest, the most number of ex-soldiers attending college on the GI Bill of any school in the southern United States, because they knew they could get a job in the oil field when they got out. I skipped that Gusino Davis was hired in 1939, or the spring of 40, to start the Kilgore College Rangerettes. My mother was a rangerette on the 15th line, and I knew Miss Davis pretty well. I was a manager one year, and then she and I would go to dinner, and I was her date to Rangerette Rebels every Saturday night each year. And I was very honored that she asked me to be her date to her 80th birthday party. I had just turned 30, so we were 50 years apart. And she was quite a character. I asked her one time, driving back from something, I said, "Miss Davis, how did you pick a uniform that has stood the test of time and been the same uniform for, it was 40 years then?" And she said, "It had to be something simple that flattered every girl's figure, no matter how tall, short, thin, or thick she was." I said, "Okay, well, what about the colors? You had the same color uniform for 40 years now." She said, "The popularity of other colors may come and go, but the colors of your national flag will never be unpopular." And she had a reason for everything she did. We always thought the design of the Rangerette uniform was really, really neat. And till we found it in an old gold cigarette ad in 1938. She had stolen the uniform design from a cigarette ad. But don't tell anybody. They don't brag about that a lot. The Kilgore College fight song is from a 1926 musical called Rio Rita. You can pull it on place too. We're all fighting Rangers, ready to fight for the victory. And they start going. She said, "Now, Ronnie, if anyone ever approaches our table who I do not know, if I have a cigarette or a drink in front of me, I'm going to shove them over in front of you. Is that okay?" Well, no one ever told her no. So we're out at the place here in Kilgore, sitting against the wall, and she turns and said, "Who is this coming towards our table?" And I looked and I said, "Oh, I bet it's a Ranger and her parents. She had just retired." And they came up and they introduced me, but they didn't care about me. And they're talking to her, going back and forth. And I'm thinking, why is this man giving me these dirty looks? Well, they walk away and I look down. I've got 2 drinks and a cigarette going in front of Miss Davis. I look like this piece of trash with her. But she was quite a character. I guess one of the other famous people from Kilgore, if we all heard of Baron Clements. Baron graduated from Kilgore High School in 1956. He was in athletics. when he graduated, one of the coaches said, "Baron, what are you going to do after high school?" He said, "Coach, I'm going to go be a bullfighter." Who grows up in Kilgore, Texas, wanted to be a bullfighter? And he went to Mexico and learned to bullfight. He fought bulls in Spain and in Mexico, was a headliner, and I've got a copy of a newspaper article, I think it was 1958, that he paid nearly $700 for his bullfighting outfit in 1958, his suit of whites. So he's one of the unknown characters coming from Kilgore. Then we had Van Cliburn. He was born in Shreveport, but his family moved here when he was small. He lived just around the corner from Kilgore Heights Intermediate or Elementary School. People would walk over, kids would walk over and take piano lessons from his mother after school. There'd be somebody for 30 minutes and someone else and somebody else. And Paul Harvey told this story, so I know it's true. Paul Harvey said that there's real to be Cliburn taught piano lessons at school, and every day a child would come over and have lessons after school. Well, we'll say Susie came over and she was sitting beside her, and Susie was playing her piece, and Miss Cliburn said, "Susie, I can tell you're not practicing. You're not going to get better if you don't practice. You need to practice more at home." And they got through the lesson. She said, "Okay, your time's up. I've got to cook dinner for Van and his dad." She went in the kitchen, thought the little girl left. A minute later, she hears the piano taken up. And she said, "Susie, you're doing better, but it's time for you to head home." The kid's playing the piano still. She said, "Susie, your mom's going to worry about you if you don't head home. You need to go head home now." The kid keeps playing. She walks in there. It is not Susie. It is 4-year-old Van, who she's never given a lesson to. He had just watched, and he picked up, and he was such a talent at the piano that he was playing better than that girl that had been taking lessons, and his mother had never given him a lesson. He played all through schools. They would have, every school would have an assembly, and Van would play for the students. He was, I think, 6'3". He had the biggest hands you've ever seen on a human. I met him one time, a couple times, and his hand wrapped around mine like I had a 4-year-old hand that just wrapped around like, I felt like a tiny child. And but his mother would not let him play sports at all. It was forbidden. The school didn't even try. And Coach Bradford at the high school at one point came up to his mother and said, "Willoughby, if you'll let Van play basketball, he may make something out of his life." She did not let him. He went to Russia to play in the Tchaikovsky, and his family they were not well-to-do, and they borrowed all the money they could against their home for him to go to Russia and compete in the Tchaikovsky competition. If he had not won, they would have been broke and destitute. They had spent every dime they had. Well, he won in Russia during the Cold War. He had the only ticker tape parade ever done for a classical musician when he came back to New York. He had the first and only gold record put out for a classical musician. He was a celebrity. He played in the White House for more presidents than any other person in the history of the White House. The last president he played for was Obama. So he was quite the celebrity, but as soon as he became famous, of course, they moved to Fort Worth, and I'm not sure the reason, but as soon as they left, his mother had their house disassembled and hauled to Luling, Texas, and put back up there. Us people in Kilgore thought they tore it down just so no one would ever be able to trace their meager beginnings. But he spent the rest of his time in Fort Worth. We'll get back to, in the 60s, oil was really cheap, and Kilgore was a regular old town. And then in 79, during the oil embargo in the Middle East, the boom was on in Kilgore to replace the Middle Eastern oil, and when oil got up to over $100 a barrel, there was so much money in Kilgore. There were a dozen people that had airplanes. One guy had a jet, which I think flew my parents to New Orleans for lunch one day. Money flowed like water. In 1979, Kilgore had the second highest deposits per capita of any city in the state of Texas. The only city that had more in the bank per person was Longview, Texas. And we were the center of the nation as far as oil and gas exploration. I would drive a forklift out to Delta Drilling and drive it from where underneath that water tower all the way across I-20 and unload pipe at Delta Drilling. It was a lot of activity in Kilgore. And then when the oil crash hit, oil had been going up and down. It's like riding a roller coaster. But when the crash 81 hit and oil went to $12 a barrel, there were businesses bankrupt in Kilgore. Our tax base went away to nothing. The forefathers running the city, no one knew that the crash was going to be this long and this terrible. And they didn't cut back on the city employees immediately, and the city was almost broke. They couldn't afford to put tires on the fire trucks and police cars. It was really, really bad. We went from, we still don't have as many employees at the city as we did in 1981. They were high flying and rolling in dough. In 1991, we passed a half-cent sales tax to bring industrial development to Kilgore so that we would not be as dependent on the oil and gas industry. And we brought in a plastics company, and every Chick-fil-A to-go bag in the nation is made in Kilgore, Texas. Lots of other companies too, but Chick-fil-A was one of their big customers. And it went crazy during COVID because all the food, had to get together. Another company we have does plastics, and they make just peanut butter lids and parquet butter tubs. And but the big thing they make now is the little cheap water bottles. They make over 1 billion of those little plastic tops for the water bottles every year, and they make the blue pop tops for Nestle's water. Another company, of course, we have Skeeter boats in Kilgore that all the Skeeter boats sold anywhere in the nation. And it's the largest selling boat in its category in Japan even. So all the Skeeter boats are made in Kilgore. We just haven't, we've been recruiting companies to take the place of the oil industry that collapsed. And Halliburton left here in 2012, and they had several hundred employees and nearly close to $100 million in assets on the books. So we recently recruited a company, and they do, from Sweden, we're their 31st location in the world. They do air purification, and they purify the air for nuclear power plants and chip manufacturers and food processors, anywhere it has to be really clean. And they're going to employ 300 people in a year when they open. Another company makes the coolers for convenience stores and grocery stores to cool the food off, or refrigerated beer and cold drinks and things. And they're building a building, and they'll employ 350 people. So we've been desperately trying to replace the oil field industry that was so wonderful to Kilgore for many lifetimes, but is most of the oil gone, although there's still some oil in Kilgore. Let's see what else. Does anyone have any questions about anything I touched on or zoomed across?
What was the population during the oil boom?
Kilgore, it went up and down every time there was an oil boom. At one point it was 10,000 right after they discovered oil here. And the technology, then it got down probably below 10 for a while. And now it is close to 15,000. But Kilgore is an employment hub for the region. All our industries bring in, but Kilgore College too, a couple of thousand. So it's pretty commonly accepted that our daytime population is closer to 25,000 than 15,000. We're one of the few places that has a huge lunch crowd for lunches, and then we don't have a nighttime crowd because everyone's here working and having lunch. Yes, sir.
I noticed you were talking about the various movies that were made in 1939 and connected to Kilgore. Well, since I'm a historian of this family, I want to point out that the Gladneys have a movie that was made in 1939 about a lady in El Paso. Her name is Edna Gladney. It was on the national scene, starting in 1939, with Gary Garson and
but
It's called Blossoms in the Dust.
Billy
Show
Bob,
it at our reunion.
Billy Bob Barnett, who's a friend of my parents, that started Billy Bob's in Fort Worth. He was at the Gladney, was where he was an infant.
And it's about the Gladney Center in Fort Worth. It's still in existence.
Oh, very funny.
Gladney and her husband, who owned Gladney over back in the 20s and 30s here in Texas. They started, bought that Gladney Center for adoption, and it's still going now.
They had that yellow flower, that's famous, yeah. There was a movie made in Kilgore, I think in '47, with Claudette Kilgore, and it's called Strike It Rich. And it was filmed in and around Kilgore, and had the National Guard in it, and it's still available. It was like a B-Western kind of movie, but that's, any other questions or anything? But I think gave y'all a quick overview of some tidbits. Elvis spent a little time in Kilgore. The first contract he ever signed was in Gilmer with a radio station. He attended the Cream Theater. He performed at our baseball stadium out here. He performed at the auditorium at Kilgore College in the winter of '54, the spring of '55, and they charged 50 cents to get in to see him. He had just been to Louisiana Hayride, and they bribed another act to come with him. So the other act with him, besides him singing, was a ventriloquist and a dummy on the stage. Elvis performed at the Rio Paul Mile, and those of you Kilgore people know Tom Mobley, Diddy Mobley. He told me he was at the Rio when Elvis was performing, and he walked outside to smoke a cigarette because it was too smoky inside. And he said we walked outside, and Elvis walks out with a girl, and they're walking, and they walk over to Elvis, had an old Lincoln, the one with the suicide doors. I shouldn't tell this, but I will. And he said that he got in the back seat of the car, and it was kind of under a street light. He sees out there, and a pickup truck comes and winds all through the parking lot, parks behind the car. A man gets out, opens the back door, and drags the girl out, puts her in the truck, and drives off. He said he was looking at the car, and he said about a minute later, Elvis gets out of the car, kind of straightened himself up, and as he walks by Tom, he said, "She didn't tell me she's married." Elvis had dishwater blonde hair when he was in Kilgore. He tried perming it, and they said he looked like an absolute fool. He would have been a star. He went to Longview, and a lady named Madge that had been to the state hairdressers convention came back, and she dyed his hair black and gave him the pompadour that he had the rest of his life. He got it in Longview, Texas, his signature hairdo from then on. Because they said with the perm, he would have never been famous. It was bad.
Did you talk about the champagne lady?
Oh, yeah, Alice Lawn. Alice Lawn was, grew up in Kilgore. She was a Rangerette. She left here, and she became Lawrence Welk's first champagne lady. And her claim to fame, her mother made her petticoats in Kilgore. And I think they were 9 yards long of that wide netting and 45 yards of 1-inch satin ribbon. And the reason I know it, nearly 5,000 women wrote into TV Guide and asked him to get the pattern for her petticoats. Her dress was almost level, it just barely went down, and she had these giant petticoats on, and that was her claim to fame, was this petticoats. And she was very, very popular. She was kind of like the Vanna White of her era. And the story is that the star of the show got jealous of her popularity, and at one point she sat on the piano and crossed her legs, and a little too much of her leg showed, and they fired her. But I think it was because she was more popular. But they got to be friends. Lawrence Welk and she got to be friends later in life. But she grew up in Kilgore and was a Rangerette and then was on TV and personality. But yeah, Alice Lawn was a very beautiful lady, but in one of the first variety show popular people on television. I did get to see it. It's not real factual, but it's very entertaining. There's other, it's not really filmed in Kilgore that I know of, but there's Miracle in These Stages, and it's about the oil boom and early times in Kilgore. It's made by the same people that did The Sound of Silence. Kevin Sorbo, yeah. Very good people. Yeah. Yeah, they altered the names just a little bit to protect the innocent, but they were quite a lot of crooks back in the day. It's been my pleasure to get to talk to y'all this evening, and this is a huge, both my parents are only children, so we had no relatives growing up. I don't like what it's like to have this many people that are into. I'd be scared, I think. But it's great to have y'all here. We're so happy to have you here. We'll hope y'all have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Okay, so, you know how we always use our phones? And I'm not old yet, but I knew exactly where it was. I just said it the other day. Okay, it is 7:51. And I just need to give you a little update. The Gladney board is going to have a meeting, we have an annual meeting every year at this reunion. And the Gladney board is going to have a little meeting in the side room. Now, so I'd like to introduce my Gladney board. I've been president for 2 years. I was vice president for 2 years before that. Our vice president, Janice Cash, couldn't be here tonight. We have our secretary, Tommy Adams. We have our treasurer, Amy Wilson. And we got, y'all come on up. Come on up so they can see you. We have directors. One of our directors is back there at the computer, Tim Johnson. Hey Tim, wave. Another director, Kathy Nealon. Come on up, Kathy. And Judy Whitesell. Now, Amy and I are rookies, but these other people have served. Oh yeah, our historian, Wally Gladney. I'm sorry. This organization was formed in 1977. They had their first little family reunion in 1976. I graduated high school in 1977. This corporation was formed in South Carolina, Winnsboro, South Carolina. And then, I don't remember what year my mom kind of started going, but my mother was very interested in the genealogy. And it gave her something to do when I went off to college. I was the last one, I was the baby, went off to college. Mama had all this time on her hands and somehow hooked up with the Gladneys. I went to college in Salt Lake City and they happened to have a very famous family research center there. And she loved coming to Salt Lake and doing research. Now, so a lot of these people, old school people, like my mom and Louise, and my mom would just go, she'd go to cemeteries. We would go across country. I was the youngest, so when I was a teenager, we would go to see my sister Dale, wherever she was living, and we'd go see my sister Ginger, wherever she was living, and we'd go see my sister Sandra. I was like the most traveled teenager and driving, because as soon as I was 16, I was driving across the country. But everywhere we went, my mother loved history, especially American history. We stopped at all the tourist sites. We stopped at all the cemeteries. I I didn't have to go to the courthouse, but we stopped, and I'm like, oh my goodness, but she educated, she was an educator, she loved it. So she loved the Gladneys. And then Louise got introduced to the Gladneys through my mom, and Louise knew all of these Dudleys. Louise and my mama knew all the Dudleys around. And they had so much fun starting the Dudley group. But they're just like a family, you know, bring a potluck, and they do that every 3 years. But they would start educating people about their roots and where the roots came from. And so some of these people ended up going to some of the Gladney things. Where's Glenna? Glenna, are you still here? She just left, okay. Glenna's mama, Dean, was one of those cousins of my mama. Anyway, the Gladney's organization is 49 years old. It's our 49th anniversary. And that is a really special thing, that they come together and bring people together. One of my goals as president is to reach out to more and more. Because we don't live forever. And we have to get the interest going in our younger generations. And most people aren't, you know, that interested. And it's really hard to get your kids to do it. But the good Lord put us in good families with good Christian values. And some of us still get together and celebrate our heritage, our families, the history, and try to educate. So I want to thank all of these board members. It was just 6 years ago that I went to a Dudley reunion in June, or the beginning of July, and then went a few weeks later to the Gladney reunion, thanks to my sister Dale, who invited me out. It was my 60th birthday. And she said, come on out. She said, come out and see me, and let's go to the Gladney reunion. And I thought, okay. And we did, and I had so much fun meeting these people. And they were so warm and so friendly. And I had no idea how much fun I was going to have. And I was hooked. And I found out Dan Pennell was the president at the time, and I found out they were having it in Fort Worth the next year. And I'm like, oh my God, they're bringing it back to Texas. I'm going to be there. I'm going to get all my first cousins there. And I think I did. And so this time, I'm so proud that we brought it back to Texas. It's only the third time in 49 years it's been in Texas. I'm so excited that all of you made that time dedication, that dedication to your families, to your parents, to your grandparents, to learn a little bit more about your heritage. So, we're going to have a board meeting, and it's my second year as president, and I have to step down because we have to do 2-year terms. We need a president, and we need a vice president, and we're always looking for new people interested to maybe be on our board. It's not real hard. Basically, you kind of show up to a reunion and show a little interest. So we've got our table set up over there. We're going to have to take our own chairs in there. But if anyone is interested in sitting in on our meeting, or if you have an interest in maybe, finding out a little more, how can you serve? Maybe you could just help us do a reunion next year. Next year is going to be the 50th anniversary of the Gladney reunion. It'll be in Winsboro, South Carolina. It's also the 250th birthday of the United States. So it's kind of going to be a big one. It's going to be a lot of fun. So whoever it is that steps up to president, you're not going to be doing it all by yourself. You have a whole team of people that have been doing it for a while. We support one another. We make it fun. We make it real. And it's really something you need to see. If you've never been to a South Carolina reunion, next year would be a really fun year to go. Last year we buried the time capsule, and I made sure we had lots of teenagers there. Amy usually brings her 4 kids, and today I've only got 3. But it's really special for those of us to be able to share these times with one another and with our children and our grandchildren. So I encourage you, keep it on going. So while we're in a board meeting, if you want to sit in, you can. If not, continue visiting. But my little team is going to start packing away because we need to be out of here at 9. But at 9 o'clock, I want us to all come out, and they have lit the stars in Kilgore. They're not always lit all the time. You kind of have to ask real nicely to have the stars lit real nicely. So anyway, we're going to do that at 9 o'clock. And just a little recap about tomorrow. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we're going to meet whoever's at the church, whoever's at the hotel. We will caravan from the hotel. And Amy will probably be our leader of the pack because she's been there before. So y'all will meet at the hotel. Or if you know, if you're from Kilgore area, you just want to meet us out there. It's the Rocky Mountain Church. And the cemetery is right next door. So let me tell you what we're going to do, because you're going to go, oh, it's so hot outside. Well, I know it's hot outside. So we're going to go inside the air-conditioned church, and we're going to all go in and sit down in church. And we're going to tell you a little bit about the history of that cemetery and the people buried in that cemetery. So we're going to tell you in the cool air conditioning before we go out into the cemetery. And when you go out into the cemetery, you go through the gate, and then head towards the shade, because all of those headstones are out there in the shade at the cemetery. Isn't that fun? Can you imagine God did that for us? Or the people that plant the trees. My husband and I went out there 3 weeks ago, and he cleaned 12 headstones. We cleaned Fergus McDowell Russell, Marianne Gladney Russell, some of their children, a lot of people. So we'll tell you about that tomorrow. After the cemetery, go back into church. Go back, cool off in the cemetery. Because yeah, it's going to be hot out there. And go back into church, cool off, and we're going to tell you about the Dudley house, the old Dudley house. So we're going to tell you about all that history while we're cooling off at the church. And then we're going to caravan over there to the Dudley house, which is now owned, is still family owned. Now it's owned by Miss Louise Rady and her husband Lynn. They take really good care of that property. And also there's Charles and his wife, Sandra. And they take excellent care, of the grounds. Now it's an old house, y'all. They don't live there anymore. Nobody lives there. But we get to go and see it. And we're going to take a group picture. So we'll tell you the history in the church, because the church is going to be cool, air conditioned. And when we get to the Dudley house, first thing we're going to do is line up and take our picture. So a lot of you have seen these pictures. These are the pictures they've been doing out there at the Dudley house. So we're going to get out of our car, get out of your air conditioned car, go stand in front of the house so we can take our picture real quick before anyone sweats. Can we do that? Okay. And then, so that's the first part of our morning. And then after that, we get to go to lunch, and then we're going to go to the Oil Museum at 1 o'clock. Okay? The Oil Museum is part of your package that you signed up to do. Normally, we ask you to pay your own, but I've included it into the package. So, if you are used to living around here and you go, oh, I don't want to go to the Oil Museum, if you really don't want to go to the Oil Museum, that's fine. But if you've never been to the Oil Museum, you really want to go, because I've already paid your ticket. Okay? So anyway, they'll have a little roll sheet and they'll let me know who shows up. So that's what we do tomorrow. And then tomorrow night at the Broadcast Museum. So we won't have as much stuff to take and set up, but the Broadcast Museum will have a short crew. And then 5 o'clock, come to the museum. If you've never been to the Broadcast Museum, it's really, really fun. Come at 5 o'clock, start looking around the museum. And then we'll have tables and chairs for everybody to sit at. We'll eat at 6. But look around the whole museum first, and then at 6 o'clock we'll eat. And at 7 o'clock, our speaker, who just drove in from Baton Rouge, is Dr. William Gladney. So he'll be our speaker tomorrow night. So does anyone have any questions? Okay. All right, and again, I want to thank my husband, Greg, for his love and patience and support. I don't deserve him, but I'm so blessed. And I want to thank, again, our crew that's been helping us. And I want to thank the good Lord above who brought us all together. You know, every year when you do Bible study, you go through that section that talks about all of the, who's related to who, and these are the tribes, and these are the tribes. Well, we are descendants of the tribes, the holy tribes. And now we learn more and more about our history because we've spread out a lot. Now, I had some things, I just wanted this to be a really fun reunion, not just, oh, bring a dish, hang out, leave. Okay, I wanted to educate you about things about Kilgore, things about Gladney, things about, hey, I really learned something at this one. And so continue to visit a little bit among yourself. I have some giveaways, but we're starting to run out of time, and we forgot to do the drawing numbers. But come and look at some of this stuff because we'll do giveaway, well, not the pigs, those are my pigs. But we have, this is a Glen Brady cow skull, which he is donating. If anyone wants a skull to take home and decorate, don't laugh. Some people collect them, you know, I don't see. But, you know, some people collect them, they do artsy stuff with them, and the people that are laughing probably know because Glenn, how many of these have you collected? Bunches. Probably like 299. So anyway, every now and then he'll clean out a few. So if you're interested in a skull, let me know, because we're going to give it away tomorrow. And Kathy, don't give me that lucky one. Okay. I know. It's not for everyone, but you know, you could paint it, you could put it out there, you could paint it, you could sparkle it, you can bling it, or you can do whatever you want. We have a shamrock. We have a little shamrock. I think Nadine brought this, not Nadine, Nadine's daughter. Anyway, she brought some things for us. And I think some other people, oh, here's the CDs. We have 2 CDs, the Celtic Women. Anyway, we have some giveaway prizes for tomorrow. Okay? So gosh, time just gets away from us. So to be continued. But another thing that I want to do is we brought some books for us, a book and a video. Thank you, Gwen, DVD. So I hope that you've had fun tonight and continue to have fun.